I was on the bridge deck when I saw a flying penguin. Now, I know what you're thinking. Penguins don't fly. But this penguin told me himself that it was getting so hot in the South Pole that he had to go back to graduate school for flying lessons, and he migrated north. He's a working professional now, and he lives in a studio apartment with 100 other chickens because he wouldn't be able to afford rent any other way. I wanted to know more. But I was in a hurry, and I had to get to Union Square. And it gets even more bizarre because I then meet a free-range turkey. And this free-range turkey has been on the run from the law since Thanksgiving. After much deliberation, I decided to turn him in, and I made myself a delicious dinner. Fellow Toastmasters, from A to B to C, but instead I'm going to take you from C to B to A. I'm going to take you from climate change to baloney to answers. So, starting with climate change, or global warming. As many of us are already aware of, the world is either getting hotter or colder, and the weather is just becoming more and more unpredictable. In Texas, we see that there's snow in Africa and Florida, and it's not getting any better, and it's a real problem. But I want to talk about a very specific consequence of climate change, and this goes back to April of 2008. In April of 2008, we had a silent famine. In the Southeast Asian countries, they were witnessing a severe drought. Many of them, for the first time, it seemed that it wasn't raining, and the rice that they were supposed to produce, it just wasn't measuring up to their annual yield. And as a result, many of the extreme poor in the Southeast Asian countries, they were affected by climate change, and they were affected by, because they couldn't afford food anymore. Most of the grains and the rice, they were being exported out, and they couldn't, whatever they made, they couldn't buy it. So, with climate change, tying it into not just as a, well, it's warm or cold, as a poverty issue, as an issue that affects many of the world's destitute. I want to go from climate change to baloney. Now, what baloney is, when we think of climate change, we might think of the cars that we drive. We might think of the textbooks that I burn after every semester. And, you know, but all of that it is contributing to climate change. But what we usually don't think of is industrial agriculture. How industrial agriculture in America is a big contributor to why we're seeing all of these unpredicted patterns of weather and of climate. Industrial agriculture, as you may or may not know, when I think of it, I think of confined animal feeding operations, cattle. It's they're not farms. They like to call themselves. They like to think of themselves as farms, but they're really factories. Factories where they have chickens and cows, and they're all squeezed together. It's like those 100 chickens in the studio apartment. It's not pretty because the conditions that these chickens have to live in, they're born into the factory and they never see the light of day. And they don't have any space. Like, this is how much space that they would have, and if they poop, it's right there and nobody cleans it. They're literally standing in their own S word. So, what happens is that all of this waste from the confined animal feeding operations, they are not handled properly, and they go into the manufacturers. They usually dump it into the river, into our water sources, and that contaminates the water, and it's just a big environmental issue. So I went from C to B, and now I'm going to go to A, to the answers. To what are the answers? I don't have one answer for you, but there are many different answers. If you read the literature, there are answers such as going vegan, to eating free-range animals, to starting your own rooftop farm. And one of my favorite ones is Jamie Oliver, who is this celebrity chef. And he believes that you can eat anything as long as you cook it yourself. And if you think about it, a lot of ethnic cooking is actually very healthy, and it's because they tend to cook it themselves, and it reduces the trans fat and all of that. But there is a policy recommendation that I want to push for, and that is reforming industrial agriculture. That is at the very least that we can all do, and how we can push for policies that would give the chickens and the cows more room and make sure that the disposal of the waste is properly handled. Well, fellow Toastmasters, now that I've taken you from C to B to A, I want you to go from answers to baloney to change.